Hello and welcome to The World Now. We'll begin The World Now in the U.S., where U.S. President Donald Trump will hold his first re-election campaign rally in Oklahoma on the date that African Americans celebrate the end of slavery. The rally will take place on the 19th June, known as Juneteenth, in the city of Tulsa, which was the site of one of the worst massacres of black people in U.S. history. The Trump campaign, referring to the date of his rally, said his Republican Party was proud of his role in winning the Civil War and ending slavery. President Trump faces re-election in November, but is lagging behind in Democratic rival Joe Biden in the polls. And global affairs analyst Calvin Dack and Kunle Falowo are guests on The World Now today for an expert's view on the implication and significance of this. Good to have you, Calvin Dack and Kunle Falowo, join us this hour. Let me start with you, Calvin Dack. The president will be holding his rally in a very significant place at Tulsa, and a very significant day as the 19th of June. How does this come to you?
Well, come as a shock, I'll say that, because we used to refer to things like this done by past political officials as dog whistles, but Donald Trump says it out plainly. Not only is Juneteenth obviously a very significant day in the struggle, continuing struggle for equality for African Americans, but it comes at a time when we are really facing these issues and realizing that there's so much to be unresolved after the murder of George Floyd. So as Donald Trump has been known to do since before he became president, and now he's doing what he can to stoke the flames of racial tension and pit one American against another. So in that sense, I'm not shocked.
Kunle, could this be some sort of solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, or with the anti-racism movement? Could you be saying, look, I hear you, I support you, and that's why the rally is holding there, or this just outrightly comes out wrong?
Well, President Trump is a very smart leader who had played on the American politics and some part of ideals. And don't forget that I always say that the country is a very polarized country where people tend to do things along party lines. And aside from that, there's always an undertone to it. The history of Tulsa, it's a very, very heart-wrenching, very sad story that had a great Black people in that state at that time. They died. They were killed by purportedly white. Justice was never done, and as a matter of fact, some historians are saying that part of history was actually wiped away from history. This is really sad, and this is coming also on the heels of the coronavirus. They're still saying that we're expecting another second surge of the pandemic. That's still coming, and also on the heels of the massive protest across the country and by extension across the world. That is also a very disturbing story. But what I feel like he's trying to do is, look, there's massive protest out there. Thousands of people are coming out in multitudes coming out to protest, and he feels like, hey, if they could do it, how come I can't do it also? Is planning to go to Oklahoma, planning to go to Florida and some other states to go ahead and have people come around. We're not sure if they're going to have personal protective equipment, gears and stuff. How do you protect the people coming out to campaign and to support you? That's another major issue. But again, it's really, really coming on the heels of so many things, and we're just watching and seeing how it's going to unfold.
All right, let me come to you, Calvin. We know that the president enjoys some level of support from the far right movement, which a lot of people will call the white supremacists. So having those kind of people at a very significant place for the Black Americans, what kind of message will that send?
Well, I think it repeats the message that Donald Trump started in the campaign as early as 2015. Now, his campaigning politically on race has been going on for decades, but specifically for the office of president, he has reinforced that they have a place in this conversation in this country. So what we're seeing is not that there are more white supremacists. They've always been here. They've always been active and always working. But what Donald Trump has empowered them to do is to be in the public dialogue, to not be shy to say things that promote their white supremacy, white nationalism. So in that sense, he has re-given them the same voice that they had a lot louder in Tulsa almost 100 years ago.
So the president, I'm staying with you, Calvin. The president is also saying he will not consider renaming military bases that are named after Confederate generals. And most of these bases are located in the U.S. South and in states where the president had most of his vote in 2016. So he's saying that the reason he's not renaming these bases is because of American history. But most people say, look, this is a political move. So I want to get your thoughts on that as well.
Oh, yes, it's a political move. Whenever I think that we're making progress in the United States, I stop to remember that there are still people fighting to have the Confederate flag and Confederate statues to commemorate those who wanted to maintain slavery in this country. And Donald Trump is giving life to that movement. So what this tells us as Americans is if he's still standing up for our past of keeping African Americans in slavery, because it's literally erecting a statue to honor them, what makes us even begin to think that he would have an honest conversation about what we can do about race today?
Kunle, let me also get your thoughts on that, because when we see support for the removal of Confederate flags and statues from America, for example, NASCAR has said Confederate flags will no longer be flown on any of the cars during the races. So why is it difficult for some people to understand that this is offensive? While it is American history, it's also offensive to some other people.
I'll also like to also mention that some Republicans, some top Republicans are also kicking against this. There are some Confederate monuments and flags that have been taken away from city centers lately, and some other are being, kind of vandalized by some protesters, angry protesters, for some justifiable reasons, owing to the fact of the history of what those statues actually stands for. The very, very terrible history, terrible past of those Confederate flags and what they stand for in the past. This is part of the American history. That's what the president is saying. But other pundits are also saying, even some top echelons in the Republican Party is saying, look, this is the ugly past of the American politics and American life. Let's do away with it. This is 2020. Let's try and unite the people together. But you have to remember, this is a great dilemma. The president was never elected on unifying the country. He was horned on dividing and polarizing the already polarized nature of the American politics so he could get an upper hand. And this has been happening for years. Actually, look, that is a very big litmus test for every American. It still have his fan base up and high. On the Republican side, those who support those past movements are still very active. They're still very, very, very supportive of the president. But what happens to, and don't forget that the protest is going on. It's not just about black people alone. Latinos are there. African Americans, of course, are also there. Some white people are also, voicing their concerns that this shouldn't be happening. Onto the polls November the 3rd will determine and decide what the fate of America is. Are we going to continue to go on the path of polarization, or are we going to stand together and unite the country?
All right, Calvin, could this move hurt President Trump, especially in terms of support from minorities in November elections?
I hope it does. I hope it hurts him. I hope that people, minorities in this country, see what he's doing in Tulsa, that's not a random choice, that it's a choice that sends a message to this country that he wants to make America great again. Too bad the period he's referring to is one that wasn't good for me or other minorities. I hope they also see that when he comes out against kneeling at the NFL, when he comes out against all of these other cultural issues. Everybody he comes out against has something in common, and that is that they are people of color, black and brown. So I hope that minorities in this country, myself included, don't forget that, and that we watch it, and that we take him at his word that he wants to take us back to the America that we are trying to fight to get away from. So I do hope that it hurts him in November. I hope that people see what his true motives are.
All right, Kunle, is this a solution, though, to take down the Confederate flags and monuments? Is that a solution? Will that be the beginning of the healing process in America?
Well, taking the monuments away from where they're installed is just a step forward. That's not just that's not the end of the walk. There's still miles and thousands of miles to go. There's so many. Looking at the unemployment rates right now, along the Black and Latino population, it's been high for a while now, but because of the pandemic, all of the gains that the Trump presidency has been touting about, record employment rates for African Americans, it's gone down the drain, equivalent to the one they had in the Great Recession in 2007. So I'm wondering what the conversation is going to be about when he goes to Tulsa and ignite his base. And I wonder what the catch is going to be about, talking about, you know, African American employment rate, records. And I would say that there's still systemic racism prevalence in the polity. Like I said, it's not going to stop now, but there's still some improvement that needs to be done. I would like to include that the House are coming up with plans to make sure that policing takes a new look in America, and it's been getting bipartisan support. We hope and anticipate that it goes out and the president signs it in, but going with what's happened right now, it's a long walk, and this is just the start.
All right, Calvin, the president hinted at an executive order. Do you have an idea, or what are the pointers to what that executive order may contain?
I haven't seen it, but my guess is that it will be essentially a glorified tweet that will express his opinion, these ideas that he has about law and order and about supporting the police. There'll probably be a line about condemning what happened in the murder of George Floyd, because he treats it as a separate incident. He and his whole administration say that it's not systemic. But like most of the executive orders that he threatens, like the recent one on social media and others, doing something presidential without doing the hard work of going to Congress and trying to come up with solutions that both Democrats and Republicans can agree on. That would take too much time. He's got rallies to do. He's got thousands of people to bring together during a pandemic. He doesn't have time to actually sit down and legislate and be an executor over the laws that the Congress passes.
Global Affairs analyst Calvin Dak and Kunle Falowo, both joining us from the U.S. Many thanks to both of you for sharing your perspective with us.